Welcome back to another week of NFL, another week of fantasy football, and of course, another week of daily fantasy sports. This is the NFL Week 2 DFS Slate Playbook video here at No Huddle Fantasy Sports, where we're going to talk all things fantasy football DFS related for this upcoming Sunday's main slate, September 19th, 2021. Whether you play on DraftKings or play on FanDuel, I've got you covered with core plays, players to build around, stacks, stats, Vegas totals, everything you need and the info you need to dominate this upcoming Sunday's main slate. So the questions are, will we continue to ride the hot hand of the Kyler Murrays and the Jalen Hurts, those guys that dominated in week 1, or will we take a different approach and play some new players this upcoming Sunday? All that answered here in this upcoming video. Stay tuned. This is No Huddle Fantasy Sports. Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel here. Welcome back to No Huddle Fantasy Sports. As always, thank you guys for tuning into the channel. Hopefully this isn't your first week here. Hopefully you guys were with us week 1 or even last season. But if this is your first time here, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Please make sure you like these videos if they're helpful. And of course, comment down below your predictions for week 2 and how you did in week 1. Week 1 for us was absolutely excellent to a degree. But in terms of the stacks and the players that we built around, from a quarterback perspective, we had Kyler Murray and we had Jalen Hurts. Both of those guys were my top 2 plays that I communicated to you guys, my top 2 stacks that I communicated to you guys, and those guys absolutely dominated. So hopefully you guys followed suit with those 2 players and did well in week 1, especially in cash games. GPP, you had to, obviously fill out somewhere else too. The running back position was good to a degree for us, but I did play a lot of Mostert. I didn't mention it in this video, or in this particular video, how much I got exposure to him because it does play out as I get into Sunday. And then with Trey Sermon out, I did bump my ownership of him, that's Mostert, way up, too high, of course, because he did land on the injured reserve, or should I say he's out for the rest of the season. Which is pretty unfortunate, pretty sad situation there. But nonetheless, it was a good pick. If you ran it back, we would do the exact same thing because you saw Mitchell, you saw backup running backs come in and absolutely dominate in his place, 100 plus, yards on the ground, multiple touchdowns scored on the ground. So things like that happen. The lesson to be learned is you can get too much exposure to a guy even in the right spot, because things like injuries do happen. So hopefully you guys did well in week 1. I know the quarterback plays really helped me out and saved me from even those lineups where I did have the exposure to Mostert there. But let me know down in the comments below how you guys did, how that video played out for you guys, and who you chose. I'd really love to hear from you guys. But we are on to a new week here. We're on to week 2. This slate has 13 games, typical slate here, ordinary slate for the regular season. I want to caution you on a couple of things as we move forward in terms of an outlook. Week 1 does matter. We want to look back at the results. We want to look back at some of the stats that came out of week 1, some of the trends, but you do want to balance that and be careful. You want to balance that with still prior season results. You want to balance that with 2020 stuff, and you want to balance that with what we know coming into the season. And I mention that because week 1 is just that. It's 1 week. A lot of things can change. There could be outliers, both good and bad, from week 1, and those things can drastically change from week to week, and they can change over the course of the season. So make sure you balance it out. Don't rely heavily just on week 1 when you pick your players for week 2 here and you build your lineups. If you do so, it could work out, I suppose, but more often than not, you'll get burned because, again, of the small sample size. So make sure you balance that out and keep that in mind. The goals remain relatively the same moving into week 2. I'm going to focus on what we know, the known as I have it listed here, and what's predictable. For last week when we chose quarterbacks, we wanted guys that had a floor with rushing in situations that we knew that they could continue to build a nice floor. So we want to continue that trend moving forward here. I'll talk about it as we get into players, but it's very important, pretty much for the same reason I said to balance week 1 results, and that's simply because there is so little data at this point in the season. You're either relying on previous season data or you're kind of guessing. So we want to stick to what we know here and what is predictable, not really worry too much about ownership at this point in the season. One thing I will pull out of week 1, and I think is important to mention though, is running back usage and snap count percentages. I will talk specifically about those stats as we talk into the running back position. But in general, that is something that's useful. You want to find running backs that are obviously on the field, obviously getting usage. And there's certain guys that are, and there's certain that aren't. And I'm talking elite guys that are on both ends of that spectrum. So make sure you pay attention to that. You have running backs that did hit 100%, believe it or not, in week 1. And you had running backs that are household names, elite running backs that basically played 50-50 timeshare splits. So those are important to consider, especially when you start to value running backs out with salaries. Something you want to focus on, and you can pull from week 1, is how often guys were on the field and their usage. Stats continue to be skewed to a degree, kind of what I had talked about already, and the simple fact that you have such a small sample size that, one play, a couple of plays, one drive can really drastically skew the results when you're talking about a 1-game sample size. So keep that, again, in the back of your head, in mind as you choose players and as you look at your stats entering week 2. Same thing with Vegas spreads and totals. They're typically off at this point in the season. They are reliable to a degree. You can kind of predict where points are going to be scored in games. We saw it last night in the Thursday night football game. I think it was a 40 or a 41 over under, and they smashed that. They went well above that. So it's really hard, I'm sure, for Vegas to predict it this early. They need the data just as much as we do, but we will look at Vegas, but keep that in mind. Again, just another cautionary thing as we move forward. And then last but not least here, still want to stick with the conservative plays. I know it's boring. I know you want to go for that super upside, multiple touchdown, random third string wide receiver play, and maybe one day we'll hit that. But right now, I'm not focused on that, and neither should you be. It's very hard to predict that. I don't want to lose money, and neither do you. So stick to the conservative plays at this point in the season until we have more of a reliable data set to rely on. So I just mentioned Vegas totals. Let's dive into them for this upcoming Sunday's main slate here. The 4 things I want to point out, 4 or 5 things, the high total games. So you can see here on the right-hand side, you have 4 games all above 50 for an over-under. That's an elite number. That's a number you want to focus in on for your stacks, for your offenses, and for your positional players. So Atlanta at Tampa Bay, Minnesota at Arizona, Tennessee at Seattle, and Dallas at the Chargers. All of those games above 50. In particular, that Dallas Chargers game, a very juicy 55, as well as that Tennessee-Seattle game at 54. Of those, the teams of Tampa Bay, Arizona, Seattle, and the Chargers stand out as really high single team totals, implied team totals. Tampa Bay is at a whopping 32.3 points to be scored. So again, when you build your teams, you want to focus in on teams that are projected to be high in terms of scoring. You want to focus in on games where there's a lot of points to be scored. One other thing that's a little bit of an outlier here is the Cleveland game. Houston playing in Cleveland. You can see here Cleveland projected a really solid second on the board, second on the slate, 30.3 implied team points. So really high total there. We will talk about that in some of the particular players I'm going to give out, but all things to be considered. And then last but not least, as you look at this, anything red or orange, however it shows up for you guys, are low total games and low total teams. So you may want to pick and choose certain players out of there. Obviously, Carolina, you don't want to say, hey, 21 points and a 44.5 over under, I am not playing McCaffrey. It's obviously not the case, but you may not want to play a complete stack from those games. It's just something to consider. Again, you want to play smart here. You want to attack the games where there's points, attack the teams where there's a lot of points to be scored. So moving into the meat of this particular video, the plays, the core plays. 2 quarterbacks we want to start out with. The quarterback position, obviously the most important position, especially from a DFS perspective. You have to nail this because we're going to be stacking with these guys. Josh Allen is my number 1 target for this upcoming Sunday's main slate. Little pricey, but he's $7,200 on DraftKings, $81 on FanDuel, playing on the road in Miami, 47.5 over under. Buffalo is a slight favorite on the road with a -3 spread in favor of them and a 25.3 implied team total. Josh Allen, though, going back to week 1, overall, if you're a Buffalo fan, not the prettiest of performances. He threw the ball a lot. They ended up losing. They barely ran the ball, and he missed some wide open, arguably touchdowns, some wide open deep targets. So you'd like to see him kind of get that accuracy more under control. But overall, there's a lot of things that come out of that game and a lot of things about Josh Allen that really make me like him for this upcoming Sunday. Again, heavy volume in week 1, 51 pass attempts. Will that happen every week? Probably not. But you're still seeing, the point is, that there's heavy volume from a passing perspective coming out of the Bills. In fact, 68% of their plays are pass plays in terms of week 1. So that number is really high. I suspect it'll go down a little bit. It's largely due to the fact that they played Pittsburgh was an elite defense, could barely run the ball against them. There were a couple good runs by Singletary. Zach Moss was inactive for that game, so they really only had Singletary. I know they like to split carries between him and Zach Moss. They weren't able to do so. So a lot of that played into it. But nonetheless, we want to attack where there's volume and opportunity, and that's what we have here with Josh Allen. In addition to that, you like to see that they are a fast-paced team. In fact, they're top half of the league in terms of pace of play. More plays being run, more opportunity to score. You know how that works from a DFS perspective. In addition to that, similar to the guys we picked last week, we're getting a rushing floor here. In fact, you're getting about 5 or 6 fantasy points per game from Josh Allen as a floor from rushing, and that's dating back to 2020. You would think things will change. Zach Moss is out. I don't know if he'll be out again this weekend. That must be the reason why they barely ran the ball last week, in addition to the defense they faced. They were winning the game for the majority of the game, so it's pretty wild that they relied so heavily on that passing game. But nonetheless, Josh Allen still got his. He ran the ball 9 times for 44 yards. Again, that's a very solid floor that you can't get out of many quarterbacks, and it's extremely valuable from a stability, from a predictability standpoint in the quarterback position for DFS. So that's something I want to focus in on every single week. You'll see me play a lot of the same types of players because of that, and Josh Allen is certainly one of those players. Now, as I mentioned, some of the situations from last week, like the running backs being out, the team they face, things like that may have influenced it. You would think there are tons and tons of millions of reasons why the Buffalo Bills organization does not want Josh Allen to run the ball, a dozen times a game. But as of last week, he's still doing it. So we'll see how that plays out this week. I'm going to count on him still running the ball and getting you those basically bonus points on the ground. There is a pass advantage this week of plus 16% for his offensive line. That's a good thing to see from Pro Football Focus. Last week was very tough. That elite, tenacious defensive front from Pittsburgh is really hard to go up against, whether you're at home or on the road. So it's good to see him probably play in a little bit of a better situation this week. Should have more time in the pocket, more things to develop downfield. The targets to Diggs, you can see here I mentioned a concentrated target share. That matters from a stacking perspective. Sometimes it's tough. Sometimes you pick a quarterback, like if you take Tom Brady, for instance. Great play this week, in my opinion. Who are you going to pick to stack him with? If you go Evans, there's a chance he gets 3 catches for 25 yards. Those things are hard to predict in offenses where there's so many weapons. For Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, Diggs is involved, Beasley's involved. You like that from a stacking perspective, and Josh Allen and the Bills offers that here. Going back to Miami, though, in the defense here, they were good in week 1. The numbers were actually really good for them, but I think that's a little bit of an outlier in my opinion. Miami's defense should not have gotten better. In fact, it may have gotten worse. But you can see here, 14th ranked pass rush in 2020, 21st ranked secondary. So not a very good defense overall, and certainly not a good secondary overall in Miami. So I think Josh Allen should have his way this week in Miami and should kind of get back on track here compared to week 1. The other guy I want to mention here is Justin Herbert. He's a little bit cheaper, $6,700 on DraftKings, $76 on FanDuel. He's playing at home versus Dallas in a 54, possibly even 55 right now over-under game. The Chargers are -3 favorites. They are a 29.3 implied team total on the week. So stats there from a Vegas perspective, unreal. Something you definitely want to get a part of. That Chargers offense here. It's a close game versus a really bad defense with a high-scoring expectation coming from Vegas, a high-scoring expectation for the Chargers for the game overall. It should be close, as I mentioned. I really like Justin Herbert this week. I think it's a great play. It's a great time to get on board with an excellent young quarterback. Week 1, he played a pretty tough defense, still put out a solid performance, had good volume in week 1 with 47 passing attempts. But the number, again, we want to look at here is 63% of the plays were pass plays for the Chargers. I don't know if that'll stand, but it's good things to see when you're picking your quarterback. You want that volume, you want that opportunity. Both Josh Allen and Herbert are throwing the ball a lot right now, at least 1 week into the season. He's top half of the league, similar to the Bills. The Chargers are top half of the league in pace of play. Again, more plays equals more opportunity. In addition to that, you're getting a ton of passing out of that. So all good things there for the quarterback. And the thing that's held back Herbert in the past, or should I say just the Chargers in general, has been their offensive line. It's been pretty brutal in the past. In 2020, Herbert got hit a lot. Still was an excellent quarterback, still was able to perform, which is unbelievable. And this year they have an overhaul, a bit of an overhaul, I should say. 4 out of 5 offensive linemen, I think that's the number, are new, whether that's a rookie or an experienced player coming in for the Chargers. And they played, the important thing is they played significantly better and played very well in week 1 compared to 2020. So that's good. And as a result, Justin Herbert should have more time in the pocket. He has an excellent arm, a cannon for an arm. He can really put the ball down the field, stretch the field. He's a smart guy. When he has time in the pocket, I think deadly things can result. So I do like all of that playing in favor of Herbert this week. You can see here that has resulted, in addition to that, in Dallas's terrible defense, with a pass advantage for the O-line of the Chargers of plus 19%. A little bit better than the Buffalo Bills there. So again, Herbert should have plenty of time in the pocket. And then the matchup here is ideal. Their pass rush in 2020 was ranked 26th in football. Not very good, and it has not gotten better this year. In fact, it may be getting even worse here entering week 2 because Lawrence, I believe, is out for the season, if not just on the IR, but I'm pretty sure Lawrence is now out for the season. So it's taken another hit, that Dallas defense. It's not good this week. They're not in a good spot. That's probably their best defensive lineman, definitely their best edge rusher. So we'll see how that plays out. They obviously got some young talent on defense now. They drafted high in terms of a defensive either end or edge rusher, I forget. But nonetheless, missing Lawrence is a key piece to that defense and is a good situation for Herbert, in my opinion. In addition to that, the secondary in 2020 of Dallas was ranked 27th. We saw them get torched time and time again. Seemingly every game they play, even with Dak, is just an absolute barn burner of a game. And that's what we want for DFS. So Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, 2 top quarterbacks for this week that I like. A little bit of a theme here. We're going to go with the AFC North for running backs. Nick Chubb and Najee Harris for Pittsburgh. Nick Chubb, of course, for Cleveland. He's a little bit pricey at $7,800 on DraftKings, and I'll mention why. Why I think that's a little pricey. $8,400 on FanDuel. He's playing at home versus Houston, 48 over/under. Cleveland is a massive 12.5 point home favorite with a crazy high 30.3 implied team total. Those numbers are excellent, and those numbers for a running back are exactly. You can't even draw it up much better. There is something holding him back, in my opinion, and I will caution you guys with it here in a second. But overall, Nick Chubb is just in an absolute elite spot, playing behind an elite offensive line, and he is an elite running back. So good luck this week fading Nick Chubb. We'll see how that turns out. But the week 1 stats, again, elite back here. Averaged 5.5 yards per carry against the Chiefs, 3.6 yards after contact. So even when he's getting hit, he's still grinding out yards. Had a 127.1 elusive rating according to Pro Football Focus. That's top 5 in the NFL. All those things just showing how good of a running back Nick Chubb really is. The offense and defensive line run advantage is plus 138%. So I'm going to pause there because that number is outrageous. I have never seen a number that high for a run, for any advantage for an O-line, D-line matchup. I didn't even know it could go above 100%. So again, you can see why. It's really tough to fade Nick Chubb this week. He is in such a cake matchup. It's just such a great spot overall, and he should eat regardless of how many touches he gets, really. Houston's defense is horrible. I mean, really bad. They allowed 5.2 yards per carry in week 1. Houston's defense is ranked 29th overall according to Pro Football Focus after week 1. Just a really, really bad defense. They're allowing in yards per carry pretty much what Chubb does. I would imagine that the Browns may be able to get away with not throwing the ball on Sunday. That could possibly be the situation. But nonetheless, I want to caution you guys on one thing here. The time split is a little scary with Kareem Hunt. So Nick Chubb is an elite back. Kareem Hunt is, if he was on his own team individually, would be likely a top back. He is rightfully just below that elite tier. He's a great running back, and they split their time 52% week 1 to 46% week 1. Think about that. That's almost a 50-50 split between Chubb and Hunt. For a guy like Nick Chubb, who is pretty expensive, I mean, he's not the $10,000 McCaffrey expensive, but pretty expensive for a running back. half his carries are going to get taken away, or half his time on the field. And it's not like Kareem Hunt just plays passing downs. You see Kareem Hunt come in and get carries, and he also splits pretty evenly the red zone work. And I'm sure the Cleveland Browns have good reason to do so. Again, Kareem Hunt's a great running back, and if you can preserve both of these backs, especially for an extended style season now with, 17, 18, whatever the number is now, I'm sure that's what they want to do, is extend the shelf life of these guys, and they should, because you're not getting much of a drop-off behind this defensive line, or behind this offensive line. And then in this matchup too, why not go 50-50? So that is a thing to be worried about. Now, the thing with Nick Chubb, though, is he has been extremely, super highly efficient. Meaning on 10, 12, 15 carries, the dude has done still the work you need him to do. You'd like to see 20, 25 touches. I don't know if you're going to get there. I honestly do not believe you're going to get 25 touches out of him this week. But against this defense, it might not matter. 15 plus touches may be the key to still a 100+ yard game and a touchdown. I believe the Cleveland Browns could get 150, 175 yards on the ground this week. Easy. Multiple touchdowns even. Easy. But how will that be split up? You just don't know, and that's the scary part here. Still like Nick Chubb, but I just want to make sure you guys are aware of that. If that's scary to you guys, back off him a little bit. Don't go super heavy. But Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, both those guys in a smash spot this week. Absolute smash spot. Najee Harris, AFC North also, Steelers running back, 63 on DraftKings, 61 on FanDuel. He's playing at home versus the Las Vegas Raiders with a 47.5 over-under. Pittsburgh is a pretty big favorite at basically a touchdown, -5.5 with a 26.3 implied team total. So, Najee Harris not very good in week one. In fact, I wrote it down here as a Jekyll and Hyde situation. The first half, he was pretty bad. The second half, he was good. I wouldn't say he was really good, but he was better. I think all of his stats doubled. He broke a couple big runs. He looked like the guy that they drafted. So a lot of people will point out that the offensive line is the reason why the running game for the Steelers sucks. And it sucked in 2020, and that probably is the reason. But I want to point out to you guys, the offensive line was pretty good in week one. Keep in mind, they beat Buffalo in Buffalo. That offensive line played very well, both from a passing perspective and a rushing perspective, run blocking perspective. Something people didn't expect. They are, again, another unit that I think 3 or 4 of the guys are brand new. So it's a little scary, but it's good to see that they're playing well from a running back perspective. That points out that the first half was really on Harris. It really wasn't on that offensive line. So I think the good news is he seems to be getting more comfortable. We're talking about this guy's second career game. The first half of the first game were the first snaps he ever had as a pro outside of preseason. So hopefully, some of those butterflies are gone and he's a little more comfortable here, and they get him in a better spot overall. But the thing here with him, again, it's good to see that offensive line playing well. The price tag on him, considering how much he's playing, is a great value. So what I want to mention is he has played 100% of the snaps in week one. That's the only running back to do so, I believe, by a good margin, by like 10+%. I think one other running back, I can't remember who, approached 90%, but Najee Harris didn't come off the field. He had 19 opportunities in week one. That's targets plus actual touches. That should increase moving forward. You'd like to see this guy, especially if he's going to get 100%. And the Steelers love bell cow 3-down backs. Guys that are going to get 22, 25, sometimes 30 freaking opportunities to touch the ball any given week. So that number at $6,300 and $6,100 stands out to me. He could easily blow through value, especially versus this Las Vegas team playing at home, big favorite. They want to run the ball. That's why they drafted this kid. Las Vegas's rush defense in week one versus the Ravens ranked 26th. They did not look very good. They allowed a 4.7 yards per carry average to just the running backs. That's important here. I pulled out just the running back yards per carry for the Ravens in week one. I mentioned that because you're talking about Latavius Murray, who, a week of practice, maybe, and Williams, who I think was like their 27th string running back at one point a couple of weeks ago. So they're pulling guys off the street, and they're getting almost 5 yards a carry versus Vegas in Vegas. I think Najee Harris, this is the opportunity for him to pay off that draft capital that they invested in him. 100% snap count, that's what we want to see. Najee Harris, Nick Chubb, 2 running backs I'm definitely considering in week 2. Moving on to the wide receivers here. the theme for these guys, because we have a theme, it seems like, for every single one of these positions here, is the Coopers, right? You see Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp. So Amari Cooper, well, really both of these guys are on that mid to low mid tier salary range, I would say, for wide receivers, right? Amari Cooper, $6,800 on DraftKings, $78 on FanDuel. He's playing on the road in Los Angeles against the Chargers. 55 over under. Dallas is a slight away underdog here at +3 with a 26.3 implied team total. Basically, let's get exposure to this game. We got Herbert. We got to come back somewhere, and Amari Cooper stands out to me. Dak and that offense in week 1 in Tampa Bay against that great defense threw the ball 58 freaking times. That is a massive amount of passing. I'm sure they don't want to continue to do that for the Dallas offense. From my perspective, Ezekiel Elliott, season-long guy, you'd like to see him more involved. But for right now, I mean, they throw the ball a lot, and they threw the ball a lot last year with Dak. If you remember those few weeks at the beginning of the year, this is what they're doing right now, and let's take advantage of it from a DFS perspective. We know there's a lot of opportunity in that offense. In addition to that, Michael Gallup is now out, so will we see an uptick in usage, an uptick in the amount of targets? It's hard to believe because CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper got a ridiculous share already, but you could see a couple percentage points tick up in their favor even with Gallup out. We'll see how that plays out. But back to the kind of the situation here. 28% target share for Cooper in week 1. That's 16 targets. Big elite number there. 34% of the team air yards in week 1. So this dude's not just catching screens, catching dinks and dunks. He's actually going downfield and catching the ball, which is what we want out of our receivers. 70% of the snaps have come as an outside receiver, and I dated back to 2020. Why am I bringing this up? Because I did struggle between CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb's a little bit cheaper. I do really like CeeDee Lamb this week, but there is one guy to worry about, in my opinion. Although this game is high scoring, we'll see. I'm sure everyone gets to eat this game. But Harris, the inside slot nickel cornerback for the Los Angeles Chargers, he's a good cornerback. He's a very, very good cornerback. He shuts down a lot of inside slot receivers. He's one of the best inside slot corners in the league. So, in my opinion, if you just kind of look at it objectively, Amari Cooper should mostly see outside cornerbacks, not the inside. He'll probably see Harris a little bit here and there, but I try to determine who would see Harris the least, and it seems like Cooper is that guy. That's why I landed on Cooper, but I do like CeeDee Lamb. If you want to go there, feel free, but for now, I'm going to list Cooper as my guy. In addition to everything I just said, you saw in week 1 him get 33% of the team's red zone targets. That's 3 total red zone targets. So high value targets in situations, in areas that you want him to be getting targets. And then I've mentioned this time and time again, this particular game has the highest projected Vegas total. It should be a shootout from both sides. It should be a really good DFS situation all around. The other Cooper I want to mention is Cooper Kupp here. $6K on DraftKings, 62 on FanDuel, playing on the road in Indianapolis with a 48 over-under. The Rams are 3.5-point favorites. Really great team, by the way, the Rams right now. 26 implied team total. So the Rams are a great team overall. They were last year too. I think that they have just taken that next step with Stafford, who is an underrated quarterback in Detroit for so long, in an organization that is just not getting it together. I mean, it's been, decades for Detroit. So I'm happy to see someone like Stafford go and take over the situation for the Rams. He's in a great spot. And on the other end of that is someone like Cooper Kupp, who we're going to take advantage here. But the big thing for Cooper Kupp, why I like him so much this week in week 2, is really his salary. Such as Najee Harris, Cooper Kupp seems mispriced to me. He's a little bit too low. He offers a lot of value. If you go back to week 1, he was absolutely excellent. He got nearly 40% of the target share. 10 total targets. They didn't throw the ball a ton, but he got nearly 40% of the target share for the Rams in week 1. He got 31% of the team air yards, and he got a third of the team's red zone targets with 2 red zone targets. So basically everything you want out of a top tier elite wide receiver in an elite offense on an elite team with a great quarterback. But the guy's priced at $6K. So let's take advantage of that before the price goes up here. And the situation is good versus Indianapolis. Indianapolis struck me as first as a great defense, but so far, no. I mean, week 1 is only 1 week. But Indianapolis allowed 254 passing yards, a 78% completion rate and 4 touchdowns to Russell Wilson in Seattle. So those numbers don't, well, two of those numbers, one of those numbers, the yards, don't really stand out. You're like, it's not like they tore them up. They really did. I mean, they were winning by a lot. Uber efficient for Russell Wilson. Didn't throw the ball a ton. 78% of the completions, 78% of the targets were completed. I mean, over 3/4 of the passes thrown were caught by the receiver. That's ridiculous. So I like this situation for Cooper Kupp. I think it's a great matchup. Week 1, Indianapolis secondary ended up grading out as 30th in the league. Now, that is a far cry from 2020, where they were, I think, a top 10 or a top 5 even defense in a secondary. So those are one of those things that it could flip very quickly. You don't want to rely too much on week 1. You could see, and I expect that Indy defense to kind of come back here. But nonetheless, the Rams are really good, and Cooper Kupp is in a great situation, and the price here is what matters. Last thing I will mention here is compare the situation for Cooper Kupp to the situation with Lockett. Kind of that inside receiver role. I think you're going to see a similar situation here as was with Lockett, and you saw Lockett go for 100 yards and really eat up multiple touchdowns last week. So I do like Cooper Kupp as my second receiver. We're going with the Coopers here, Amari Cooper and Cooper Kupp as my 2 recommended receivers. So, of course, the next theme for tight ends, got to pick out a theme for these guys here, is just go with the guys with the longest names possible. Robert Gronkowski and James O'Shaughnessy. I mean, how much longer of names can you get for NFL players? But these 2 guys do stand out to me this week. I'll explain each, obviously. $4,700 for DraftKings for Gronk, $5,800 on FanDuel. Playing at home versus Atlanta, 52.5 over/under. Tampa Bay is a crazy favorite at home at minus 12.5. 32.3 implied team total. So tons of points to be scored by Tampa Bay here. It's always going to be difficult determining which of their basically major star players is going to perform because they just have so many on offense. But I do think Tom Brady eats up here. Atlanta's defense, their secondary is probably the worst in the NFL. A lot of points are going to be scored here. There's a previous Super Bowl connection. Gronk was there. All of that kind of plays in here. But for me, Gronk is pretty cheap, and he looked incredible in week 1. Now, will he look like that every week? Now, he's gotten older. He's taken a beating. He's retired once. All of that, is in play here. But he did look good week 1, and he's pretty cheap. He was the 3rd highest graded tight end in week 1, according to Pro Football Focus. He played 88% of the snaps, which is a little surprising to me. Not a lot of tight ends play that much, so Gronk was on the field a ton. He got 8 targets, which was tied 3rd for tight ends in week 1. 2 of those were in the red zone. And then you can see here, I mentioned a stat that's a little abstract, but I think it's very valuable for tight ends, and that's 2.43 yards per route run. And that was 5th among tight ends. I want to focus in on that because a lot of tight ends get junk kind of routes or junk yardage. You know what I mean? They run just directly to the sideline or run 5-yard out, things like that, right? But Gronk's number, and that number looks small, but if you take it in comparison to the top guys in the NFL for tight ends, he was ranked 5th. So you like to see that number. You want it to go up a little bit more, but 2.43 yards per route run is a good indicator for Rob Gronkowski that he is at least getting downfield a little bit in terms of his routes as a tight end. He ran routes on 88% of the pass snaps played. It's a weird thing, again, to mention for tight ends, or to mention in general, but it's good for tight ends. By that I mean a lot of tight ends come in on a pass play and they block. But in Gronk's case, on nearly 90% of the snaps he was a part of where there was a pass play called, he went out for a route. That's what you want to focus in on for tight ends. That means that these guys are not just the generic block, be the 6 offensive lineman type of player, but they're actually a part of the route trees. They're a part of the actual play itself going downfield. So all of that matters here in selecting a tight end. I like that for Gronk. He was this week. One thing I want to point out, it's not always the best indicator, but Pro Football Focus, it's worth mentioning, has him ranked as the best tight end matchup in terms of tight end versus a defense. And then overall, his salary is pretty low. It's a manageable salary, and then he should be low owned because everyone's seemingly going to Evans, Antonio Brown, Godwin, those types of players. Let's go Gronk, and let's be a little bit different here. And then the wild card here, and this is purely like a punt play because I do like to punt tight end a lot. So I thought I'd throw one out to you guys. That's James O'Shaughnessy. $2,700 on DraftKings, almost bare minimum, $4,400 on FanDuel. Playing at home versus Denver, 45.5 over/under. Jacksonville is a home underdog at +6 with a very low 19.8 implied team total. So not good numbers there from an offensive perspective overall, but we're sticking with this for the punt play, basically. He's near bottom salary. Like Gronk, he played basically 80% of the snaps. He got 8 targets, the same amount of targets as Gronk in week 1. That's third amongst tight ends. And he ran a route 91% of the snaps, the pass snaps played. Again, focus in on that. That's a good stat for tight ends. 91% of the snaps that he was in on that were pass plays, he went out. So he's not just blocking. This guy is actually, again, a part of the pass play, a part of that tree. He's got Trevor Lawrence throwing in the ball. All good things here at such a small price tag on DraftKings. Jacksonville should trail. I mean, look at the numbers there. He should remain involved. He should throw the ball a lot. He does not stretch the field by any stretch of the imagination, but he's mostly involved in those small intermediate targets, 3-yard turnarounds, buttons, whatever they call them. But he can easily hit value. That's the point here. He's going to be really low owned at $2,700. If he catches 3 passes for 20 yards, he basically, 5 points at $2,700, and boom, you get enough. But obviously, we hope 8 targets. He turns 7 of them into 50 yards. Something like that will be an outstanding value for his price tag. So if you want to punt, I like James O'Shaughnessy, however you pronounce it, for my punt tight end. The slide I added last week, what we want to talk about is stacks. I removed some of the players to talk more about stacks here. But going with our 2 quarterbacks, Josh Allen and Justin Herbert, I'll quickly move through this. Josh Allen, we want to stack Stephon Diggs. That's the number 1 guy I want to stack with him. In addition to that, Cole Beasley is in play. And then if you want to get a little crazy, you want to consider someone like Emmanuel Sanders or Gabriel Davis. In that particular order, definitely Diggs, I would say most definitely Diggs, more than likely Beasley. And then Sanders and Gabriel Davis, if you want to throw more guys in, feel free, but those are the other guys. And then coming back from that, in order, the guys I like to come back against that stack for Miami is Devontae Parker, Jalen Waddle, and Mike Gesicki, in that particular order. I like Parker a lot in terms of coming back against Josh Allen. I think he's an underrated receiver. Seems to have a good connection with Tua, so I do like Parker. Justin Herbert's stack is going to go Keenan Allen for sure. I absolutely love Keenan Allen this week, by the way. I just didn't list him because I don't want to be redundant. I'm going to talk about him anyway here. Keenan Allen in an excellent spot. Whether you're playing Justin Herbert or not, I think Keenan Allen is definitely a must-play in DFS this week. But Justin Herbert with Keenan Allen for sure. I do really like Mike Williams. He had like 12 targets last week. And again, people forget he was a first-round draft pick for the Chargers. So he's definitely a guy they want to get involved. He's a big receiver. I like Keenan Allen. I like Mike Williams. And then if you want to get a little crazy, again, Jared Cook, and you could even go Austin Eckler. Eckler didn't have a single target last week, which is a little weird. I think that'll change moving forward. They have to get him involved more. They should. He's a great elite back. But nonetheless, that's the particular order of a stack I like. And then coming back from that, I do like Elliott this week. Even though he's on the road, I think he's a good contrarian play to a lot of these higher-owned players. Ezekiel Elliott he ran a ton of routes last week. He looked good when he got the ball, just didn't get the ball much. And that Tampa Bay defense is so stout. What did you really expect? So I do like Elliott this week. And then, of course, I mentioned Amari Cooper in an earlier slide. And then CeeDee Lamb I mentioned as well. So all of those guys are great to come back against Justin Herbert. I actually don't mind a full game stack here if you want to get exposure to basically everyone. Other highlights. Tom Brady. I think for cash games, Tom Brady is a great play this week. He should eat in Atlanta or at home versus Atlanta. They're projected so many points, but the problem, the reason why I didn't list Tom Brady, A, he doesn't offer anything on the ground really, right? I've been liking that for the early part of the season. B, it's really hard to predict who's going to get the ball. So many options. That's why Brady is great. It's not why he's great, but you know what I'm talking about. That's why he's a great option, because he has all these options. But in general, it's really hard to predict who's going to get the ball. I do like Matt Stafford. In terms of a low play quarterback this week, low owned play, I like Matt Stafford. I talked about Cooper. I do like Woods if you want to go with that stack, and then come back on the other side with whoever you want, right? But I do like Matthew Stafford. Dak Prescott obviously fits with the CeeDee Lambs and the Amari Coopers, getting more exposure. If he's going to throw the ball 58 times a week, I mean, you got to play Dak Prescott regardless. Christian McCaffrey, I mean, what else do you need to know? Just play Christian McCaffrey every week, especially when he's under $10,000. I talked about Elliott a little bit already. I do like David Montgomery. I didn't highlight him, but David Montgomery in a good spot for Chicago this week versus Cincinnati, I believe. I do really like David Montgomery. Chris Carson, I also really like. I like that Seattle team in general. Chris Carson looked really good. I think Rashard Penny is a little banged up right now. Chris Carson should get the bulk of the carries playing at home this week. Who they playing? I can't remember. Anyway, Chris Carson is definitely a great play. Justin Jefferson, I think it's going to be a little bit of a shootout for Minnesota this week. So I do like Justin Jefferson. Some value plays, maybe a little bit of Brandon Cooks and Donovan Peoples-Jones for Cleveland, although that kind of goes away from that Chubb play. Both those guys are relatively cheap, if not really cheap, and offer some value. Julio Jones is a play I'm considering. It's basically, if he doesn't get it going here soon, I'm going to believe the dude's washed up, which is really sad because Julio Jones is just, I grew up with this guy and unreal athlete. I talked about CeeDee Lamb. DK Metcalf, also great play for Seattle. Take your pick, Lockett or DK Metcalf. It's going to be alternating weeks at times. I like Metcalf this week. Mike Evans, great play. I think most of the ownership is going to go to AB, Antonio Brown, and Godwin. I talked about Gronkowski. My next play would probably be Mike Evans. Cortland Sutton for Denver. You're going to see with Jerry Jeudy out, someone's going to get the ball more, and I do think Cortland Sutton is an extremely underrated good receiver, so you're going to see Cortland Sutton, in my opinion, excel here soon, hopefully this week for Denver with Teddy Bridgewater. And then Noah Fant as a tight end, another play you guys could get on. I like Noah Fant, similar deal here for Denver. Had a really good week one, getting a lot of targets from Teddy Bridgewater, and should continue to do so, especially with Jerry Jeudy now on the mend. So that really wraps it up. I mentioned last week, if you guys don't use one already, you should probably start checking out an optimizer. They, of course, are still getting their data, a little sorted out. It's not the most reliable thing in the world in week 1 and week 2, but it is worthwhile if you're setting multiple lineups. I do really like Daily Fantasy Nerd. It is linked down in the description. If you click on it, that itself helps out the video, or helps out the channel. If you sign up for a month or a year or whatever, that does help me out, a little bit of a kickback. So one way you can help it is to certainly check out that optimizer, and I would really appreciate it. And I do use it. I mean, I honest to God use it a lot. I've showcased it in other videos. It's something I can't win without, to be honest with you guys. So definitely check that out. And that's really it, guys. I appreciate you guys hanging in there. I know these videos can get a little long, but I want to make sure I cover everything in detail as you guys expect it, so you guys can make the right decision. So as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching the video. Hopefully week 1 was great for you guys, and week 2 continues that trend of being great for you guys and putting money in your pocket from a DFS perspective. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel. Please make sure you like these videos if they're helpful. And if you feel like it, leave some comments down below. I'd love to, a little bit more back and forth would be much appreciated. Bounce some ideas off of one another. That's always helpful for the community, for me, for everyone. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. I wish you the best of luck this upcoming Sunday. Let's crush some GPPs. Let's easily win some cash games. And overall, let's win some money this upcoming Sunday in DFS. I'll talk to y'all soon.